our homicide clearance rates are down almost 2x in the last 40 years, which means you've got about a 50-50 chance of getting away with homicide in America today, which is pretty alarming, right? That's the first is witnesses don't cooperate anymore. The second is our expectations of truth have gone through the roof. And then those two things are compounded by a staffing crisis. So you have this kind of trifecta where it used to be very hard to get away with killing someone in America. And today it's generally really easy. And that's like a problem that we look at and go, technology can fix this.
Welcome to Inspired. I'm Alexa Von Tobel. What if we could bring missing people home faster? What if we could solve crimes in hours instead of months, while actually protecting privacy and reducing wrongful arrests? Garrett Langley believes safety and technology can coexist, and he is proving it's true. He's the founder and CEO of Flock Safety, valued at about $7.5 billion. Flock now works with over 5,000 communities and nearly 5,000 law enforcement agencies across America. This year alone, the technology will help generate close to 1 million arrests using drones that arrive on scene in under a minute and can literally have AI identify suspects from half a mile away, all while reducing wrongful arrests. In this conversation, we talk about how Garrett built Flock from the ground up, what the future of policing looks like when technology handles the paperwork, and why he believes we can be both safer and more protected because of technology. As a mom of 3, as someone who cares deeply about safety of our children here in America, this episode hits close to home and gave me real hope for a safer society. I'm excited for you to listen. Let's dive right in.
If you're running a startup, we know things like managing equity and communicating with investors are always top of mind. Carta has built a connected suite of tools that over 40,000 companies use to do just that. Their platform of software and services helps you lay the groundwork so you can focus on building. To learn more or get started, visit carta.com.
And with that, let's welcome Garrett. Garrett, first of all, I know we're just meeting for the first time. I am sincerely a massive fan. I sit here as a repeat entrepreneur myself, but most importantly, I sit here as a mom of 3 kids in a world where I often don't like to pick up the paper because today there were so many shootings, and not just one shooting, many shootings. And my kids were like, "Mom, what's this?" And anyways, I just am so grateful for what you're building here. I think the world needs it. And so just welcome. I'm really delightful to have you on today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
So I want to just quickly start from the beginning, which is I've had a lot of repeat entrepreneurs on here. You're a repeat entrepreneur, and actually you've had just already a really remarkable career. You were one of the first employees at Firethorn, which later sold to Qualcomm for over $200 million. You co-founded Experience, a live events platform, which then was acquired by Cox Enterprises for over $200 million. You helped architect Clutch, an incredible car subscription and fleet management company. This is far from your first rodeo and far from your most, this is maybe one of your bigger companies, but you've seen a lot of success. And I think just before we dive into talking about Flock Safety, I would love to just ask, what have you learned that you could pay forward about being a successful entrepreneur that kind of has been some of the maybe rules and track of your life now that you've been through it so many times?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always just go back to there's this constant debate, I think, in technology entrepreneurship of, is the product the most important thing? Is the market the most important thing? Is it the team? And after 20 years or so now of trying to build important companies, it just seems like team is the only thing that matters. And I originally thought that was something that was particularly true for early stage companies, but now Flock's, close to 2,000 people. When people ask internally, what's the biggest risk to the company continuing to do well? I just get back to people. Like, if we can hire and retain and train incredible people who are mission oriented, everything rolls downhill. And when I think about Fire Ventures, we about the highest highs and lowest lows, like all made better with a stronger team. So for me, like, whenever I look at a problem, I immediately jump to like, this is probably people oriented. Let's focus on that first, and everything else tends to take care of itself.
I agree with you. People are pretty much the 1, 2, and 3 most important part of any equation. You grew up in Atlanta, and I always like to ask people, and I used to live in Atlanta, Flock Safety's headquarters in Atlanta. I always like to ask people before we dive into just the immense success that you've had. Is there anything from your childhood that really stands out that you kind of feel like was extremely helpful to enabling your success today? And it could be anything, but I always like to ask, like, what did your parents do?
Yeah.
Like, so not what did they do in their careers, but like, how did they raise you that made you so comfortable with risk?
I think that might be a born trait. But if I reflect now on it, my father has never used a laptop in his entire life. He got an iPhone for the first time maybe 2 years ago. And so he starts to ask the question like, how did I wind up in technology? And what we kind of skip over is, I don't think I've ever met a single person that doesn't love my father. He is like the perfect definition of that old school sales guy that knows everyone on a first name basis, knows where their kids went to school, brings them a treat on Christmas or Thanksgiving or their birthday. And like, he just loved people and he was so good at it. And he spent his entire career in sales in a field model, selling industrial rollers. So not necessarily the most glamorous job, but I learned through real osmosis, like how you treat customers. And I think now, like looking back, I think earlier in my career, I don't think I had that clarity. But I think about it now and I'm like, man, I learned everything I know about managing a customer, managing an employee, managing relationships through him. And it has nothing to do with technology. I think that skill set is really hard earned. And I think a lot of my success stems from that ability.
That's so great. And what a nice shout out. Um, I want to talk a little bit about Flock. And Flock is a company that the team here at Inspired, we've talked a lot about it just being one of the companies we really admire. And just a few quick stats for everybody. So, in March of 2025, just recently, you guys have raised $275 million at a $7.5 billion valuation, making it one of the most highly valued safety tech companies in the world. And also, your most successful venture to date. Can we just tell everybody, what does Flock Safety do? Like in plain English, give us a lot of the detail of like what you guys are doing on a daily basis and who are your customers.
At the end of the day, Flock is a crime fighting company. We happen to fight crime with technology, and we have three types of customers. Kind of our core bread and butter is neighborhoods. I live in a neighborhood, it's a 80 home cul-de-sac, kind of classic planned development. And there's hundreds of thousands of neighborhoods in America, and we've got a nice portion of that. We then service businesses, right? Whether it's a hospital or a retailer, every business wants to keep both their employees safe and their assets safe. And then the third customer, who's really the kind of linchpin of the equation, is local law enforcement. Because at the end of the day, a neighborhood nor a business can actually solve crime. They can just help. And it's local law enforcement's job to solve the crime. And so the whole idea stemmed from this realization that, it's just too easy to commit crime and get away with it in America. We have more crime than we should have. And that is because it's easy to get away with. And so we kind of just kept picking at that kind of real onion peel of like, let's go layer and layer deeper. And eventually got down to this is a very solvable problem. I think we can actually make a pretty big dent. And, now when I think about when I meet with the police chief or a mayor and they're like, Garrett, how do we know this is going to be successful? How will we define it? And this is kind of maybe surprising, but I go, job growth. It's actually all stemmed back to jobs because for a community to thrive, there needs to be economic growth, economic prosperity, a belief that your future is going to be better than what it is today. And in an environment where crime is rampant, that future is dissolved. And so we kind of try to build that bedrock of safety so that communities, whether they're big or small, have an ability to thrive.
I love that. Just to give you a sense of how obviously profoundly widespread the platform is, you are in more than 5,000 communities, working with almost 5,000 enforcement agencies, 4,800, and tens of thousands of businesses. What's the product? Like, let's pretend I'm a small business and I buy Flock Safety. What am I getting?
Well, nowadays we have about a half dozen products that you could buy, but I'll give you a good example. We work with, on the business side, a lot of retailers. And for retailers, when you pull into their parking lot, you might see one of our overt products like a trailer. It's got flashing lights. It's got a speaker that will talk down to it. It's got cameras that can pan, tilt, and zoom. That's a very overt solution. So if you're looking to make a kind of stronger presence, that's there. We also have more covert solutions like our license plate recognition cameras. And that allows the retailer to keep track of every vehicle coming off and on their properties. And that might not seem that interesting, but if you look at one of the most pervasive crimes impacting retail, it's organized retail theft. And this is a billions, tens of billions of dollars of theft on an annual basis. This is not your 16-year-old stealing the screwdriver. This is very organized gangs targeting, our country's biggest and smallest retailers. And so being able to build that web of, okay, well, this vehicle hit 6 different, locations on the same day, that's fairly abnormal shopping behavior. And so that's not illegal. But if you were starting to build an investigation, that's definitively something worth noting. And so it's a combination of both cameras, audio devices, and then kind of the software to pull that all together, which allows us to help. I think we're going to finish the year just around 1 million arrests on the system.
1 million arrests. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Actually, Garrett, Garrett, can you just give us a quick overview from your point of view of what does crime look like in America today? Like in your point of view, if you just summarize, I live in New York City, so I have a sense of New York City crime.
Sure.
I don't keep tabs on crime elsewhere. It feels like things are getting more dangerous, not less.
So, the good news is that generally speaking, crime is going down.
Great.
Now, that's very good. But there's kind of 2 things going against that, though. One is a rise in, let's call it transparency or awareness, which is 50 years ago, you read the news once a day. That's it. Now you have a constant barrage of news information. So you think about this, recent weekend, most likely most of us would have found out the weekend news Monday morning. Instead, we found out about it Friday night, Saturday morning, kind of throughout the weekend, which creates this kind of sensationalized sense of what's happening. So that's not good necessarily. The second thing is it is getting harder to solve crime. So let's unpack something like homicides. If you look at the data, our homicide clearance rates are down almost 2x in the last 40 years, which means you've got about a 50-50 chance of getting away with homicide in America today, which is pretty alarming, right? That's for statistics, pretty good odds. So why is that the case? So there's really 3 things that have changed in the last few decades as it relates to homicides. The first is witnesses don't cooperate anymore. It used to be kind of expected societally that if you had information related to a homicide or violent crime, you'd stand up. Now, no way, right? There's a fear of retaliation. There's kind of no societal expectation. There's no personal benefit. And so we used to rely on eyewitness and now we can't. Okay, that's a problem. The second is our expectations of proof have gone through the roof. And this is largely a good thing. But, people like you and me watch NCIS on TV and we assume there's cameras everywhere. And so when you show...
By the way, how do you know I love crime television?
Yes. Well, and you watch that and you're like, oh, this is how the world doesn't work this way. And so you get to a judge, you get to a jury, and absent incredibly hard evidence, an arrest will not occur. And that's actually, I think, good. We're holding ourselves to a higher standard of eliminating wrongful arrests, but that kind of moves the difficulty level up. And then those 2 things are compounded by a staffing crisis, right? So you saw over the last decade, societally, we no longer prioritize law enforcement as a kind of idolized workforce, like we do firefighters and doctors. And that's created this gap. Not only are we short on humans, we're short on experienced humans. And so while patrol and kind of men and women driving around in patrol vehicles is largely flat, detectives are down dramatically. So you have this kind of trifecta where it used to be very hard to get away with killing someone in America. And today it's candidly really easy. And that's a problem that we look at and go, technology can fix this. Technology can make a dramatic impact on how easy it is to get away with homicide.
We're going to come back to sort of what you see could continue to be possible. But I want to double click for a minute so that I really understand. So you have many different devices. A lot of it is video.
Yeah.
There's algorithms that help parse through the data. You also have a lot of customers that define safety very differently. A school, a Fortune 500 retailer, and a major police department all have unique different needs of like what they're trying to solve for. How do you maintain a unified philosophy while servicing so many different customers?
So we really only hold one or two tenets core to us. The first is we follow the law, which might sound simple, but it's important. We follow every law. And then two, we don't define which laws are societally enforced. And so you mentioned you live in New York. Jaywalking is against the law. It's clearly not societally enforced in New York. But you go to Denver, people don't jaywalk there. It's wild. Like they wait for the light to turn green and they follow the crosswalk, and it's great. That's expected in Denver. It's not in New York. And so the way we've architected the system is in a way that every customer has certain levers they can pull to kind of tweak how the system works for them to enforce the laws they want. And we talked about this, the retail example earlier. I'll give you one other good one. If you were to go to a major home improvement store and you were to drive a U-Haul, that would be flagged as very suspicious in our system. We have a bacon program. Hey, if a U-Haul ever comes on property, send us a notification. And you might be wondering, like, well, Garrett, why would that be weird? I'm like, well, you think about home improvement, DIYers like you and me will get a refrigerator shipped to our house. General contractors have their own trucks. So the U-Haul kind of example doesn't make sense. You shouldn't most likely be driving a U-Haul. Now, there's nothing suspicious about driving a U-Haul on a normal road. So for that city customer, that would be a weird alert. But for home improvement customer, they might want that alert. And so the whole system from like what you get alerted to, what you look for, how long the data is stored, who has access to it. Like there's a full team of kind of compliance and product people who think about how do we allow every customer to get the perfect version of Flock.
Garrett, that's a really good example. Can you give us any other like unique, weird things that get flagged? By the way, really glad that U-Haul at a Home Depot gets flagged. That actually feels safer for society. Give us an example of some of the other kind of interesting tidbits you picked up.
Yeah. So like, here's another good one. There's a small town in Illinois, and I won't name the city, but it's a small town. Let's call it 7,000 to 8,000 people, mostly residential. This is maybe 2 years ago. And they had this consistent case where between 3 and 4 o'clock, so right during school pickup, a black tinted out SUV would break into homes. So like, this seems like a pretty reasonable case, right? Like the person would take off their license plate, they'd go into the communities to black SUV. So the police department created an alert that said, hey, the next time we see a black SUV with tinted windows, without a license plate, driving between 3 and 4 p.m., when it enters a neighborhood, we want to treat it like it's a stolen car. It was like, one, it is illegal to drive without a license plate, but two, in this small town, it's just they got hit over and over again. And like that person wound up getting arrested the next day once they added that alert. And so you look at that and like, there's nothing necessarily suspicious about driving between 3 and 4 in a blacked out SUV normally, except in that town.
So basically your point is like, you can get incredibly specific about what you want the videos and all of the data that's coming through to go flag and then find it nearly instantly the next time that it's flagged.
Yeah. Or like we have a lot of customers who are in the industrial space. So you know, like oil rigs and manufacturing facilities. And these are, massive campuses, right? Tens to hundreds of acres. It would be impossible to surveil or protect this area with humans. And so they deploy our cameras and they can teach the camera how to call 911. So it's like, oh,
wow,
there should never be a human in this area. If we ever see a human on this camera, call 911. Or if we see a human after hours, or in the case of some of our local law enforcement, you have this problem in New York too, these like street takeovers where these gangs will shut down an intersection and do donuts. Well, they can program the camera to say, hey, if we ever see 20 cars in this intersection, 15 cars intersection, that's really strange. Notify the nearest law enforcement officer, and they'll get an alert in their patrol vehicle and can respond really quickly.
I mean, it feels like what's happening is you're really building this observation layer that then can do an incredible amount, which kind of brings me to some of the questions I'm most excited to ask you, which is you're creating with Flock Safety this incredible observability layer that then allows smart, more informed people to figure out what they want to be flagged on. Um, if you fast forward 10 years, what
Yeah.
do you think public safety could look like? And
Yeah.
how do you think about the evolution of flock safety in that category?
So I think there's a few parts that I'd look at. The first is, I've been going back and forth with a couple of chiefs and mayors of major cities and trying to ask the question of like, why isn't there a Teach for America style concept for local law enforcement? Like, how do we actually rebuild kind of the public perception of what it means to be a public servant? Because I think Teach for America did an incredible job for our elementary and middle school and high school system to bring in people who want to just help the world. So I think there's this idea that we have at least where if you look at a police department today, let's call it a third, a third, a third, a third in patrol, a third in investigations, and then a third in back of house. And the back of house is like report writing, it's policy writing, it's going through all of the challenges of running a police department today that didn't exist a decade ago. I think all of that goes away. Like that is just so obviously can be replaced with software and AI.
Of course. That's what's
And
happening in medicine, right?
what you notice in medicine too is that the bedside manners and their efficacy goes up because they're spending
Yeah.
less time being a note taker and more time being a doctor. And more importantly, being a doctor that you're having a physical, very human interaction with. And so when I think about law enforcement in a decade from now, I'd like to imagine a world where our investigations unit actually has come down. Our back of house has come down dramatically. And we've reallocated all of that resourcing into a patrol-led model that's very community-oriented. And what I mean by that is, I think about my own experience in Atlanta. I don't know the officer that patrols my neighborhood. I think that's a total shame. It's like
Yeah,
when
that is
I'm
a
in a
shame.
moment of crisis, I kind of want to know who that person is before that happens. But today, they're so overworked and understaffed. All they can do is respond from 911 to 911 and never catch a breath. And so I have this vision, at least, of a world where can we double the size of something like the Atlanta Police Department's patrol unit so they have more time to spend in the community, more time to build relationships, and get rid of all the back of house stuff that's it's not critical to be done by humans. There's got to be a way we can do it more effectively.
So basically, what you're saying is actually shifting potentially about a third of the workforce into the field such
Yep.
that we actually have safer streets, safer homes, and potentially even increasing the bedside manner of and I did think about this the other day. It's funny that
Yeah.
you say that. I was like, I wonder who would be the person that would show up at my house if I had like a mate. And I was like, I should know like that.
Yeah.
In the same way that like I know who my local representatives are. Like, why don't I know that? Because God forbid something horrible happens. I do want to know. I actually like to use the Minority Report kind of style advance because we've all seen that movie of just
Yeah.
like technology being so good that at some point it can even predict a crime is about to happen and stop it and serve. And I mean, you have gunshot detection. I mean, and that can call
Yeah.
911 immediately, which as a parent of 3 kids, like please do more of that.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about what are the things that you have to be really thoughtful about so that we don't end up in like a Minority Report style where like a robot
Yeah.
comes and cuffs me.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. People pick on the Minority Report, and there's one thing that Minority Report did really well, and one that they did really poorly. On the right side, you think about it, it was decades of arrests with only one wrongful arrest. How nice would that be if our current judicial system and policing system only had one wrongful arrest and multiple death penalties? That sounds great. I think what we all get uncomfortable with, which I agree with, is this idea of uh, uh, inhuman thing, a precog in the case of the movie, making this pretty terminal decision. There's steps in crime. There's notification that something's happened. That might be a 911 call. In Minority Report, that's this precog saying, hey, something happened. Then there's an investigation. And then there's the, making the arrest, closing the case. I think that a human should always be involved in the first. Hey, should we go investigate? Is this a real crime? I think software and AI can completely run the investigation. Like there is nothing particularly human about saying, hey, I'm going to go look at this camera. I'm going to go pull this cell phone tower dump. I'm going to go look at this person's background, all these things. But then a human should be at the end saying, okay, Alexa, do I think this is enough burden of evidence to make an arrest? And I think that's actually a very human thing because I think societally that is going to continue to change. I think the burden will continue to go up in a very good way. Like I think that the advocates who are against kind of increased police technology are missing that with this increased policing technology, we can increase the burden of an arrest and actually decrease what is one of our societal kind of black eyes of wrongful arrests. Like how often, too often, do you see someone who's been in jail for a decade for a crime they never committed?
Because I'm really fascinated by this. What is the role of drones in the future of public safety? What's really clear to me is that cameras are going to get incredibly inexpensive, and I'm sure at some point, like really, like $1 per camera type price. You can have cameras everywhere being recorded 24 hours a day, and to your point, you can use AI to parse through those to pull the minute when actually the black SUV showed up. Let's talk about drones. How do you think about the role of drones?
We've deployed drones in some of the cities we work with that have a higher crime rate. We can detect the gunshot with our audio devices and have a drone there within under a minute. Whereas today, some of our cities, might deploy drones, every so often. Our most advanced cities, drones get on scene first 94% of the time. And the
Wow.
level of the level of precision. I'll give you one other example, Alexa, which I think speaks to the positive impact. So one of the towns we work with, they have a major mall. The mall is a customer at Flock. And a car comes into the mall. It's a felony warrant on this vehicle. This person is known to be armed and dangerous. It's like not good, right? And this is the
Yeah.
busiest part of this town. Normally what happens is SWAT gets called in and there's blue lights, there's automatic weapons, there's, heavily armed, response. And that would have been on the 5 o'clock news. And that mall would have had quite a bit of a challenge over the coming months. And more importantly, someone probably was going to die. And either was going to be the individual with a warrant, an officer, or an innocent bystander. Instead, what happened was this customer's kind of got the full Flock technology stack. They get the alert, a drone is dispatched. Now, they also in our system can see that this individual has a distinguishable tattoo on the forearm. The drone from over almost a half mile away can zoom in, finds the individual with the tattoo, can also see the individual is not currently armed and take him down from behind. No one has any idea. It's like this level of precision, this level of safety has never been seen before. And I think that's just like one in the last few months of thousands of examples where drones can just really change the way law enforcement works.
By this year, 2025, Flock has surpassed 300 million of ARR and with nearly 70% year-over-year growth, which is, I always like to say here at Inspired, we like to look for companies that as they get bigger, they get better, and actually their scale ramps and their scaffolding is strong enough so that as they get more precise, the product is really nailed what it does. They actually can grow faster, and you're doing that. What's helping you scale that quickly?
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing is the products work. I was talking to a chief of police in a small town in Indiana. And he was like, our contracts, put most of the risk on us, not our customer. And he was like, Mr. Langley, you must be incredibly confident that your products are going to work. And I'm like, yeah, I've seen it time and time again. When a city fully embraces technology, fully embraces Flock, the results don't happen in months, they happen in hours. And this is a transformation of both the culture inside the police department, the impact in the city. And we just hold so dearly as a company that like everyone deserves the right to be safe. And today that's not the case. And in the combination of technology and really good people and really good policy, we can build that future together.
One question I've been sort of dying to ask you, if you think about the future, the next decade, you are probably one of the people in this country and maybe even the world um, who has uh, a lot of clarity on what could be possible. And clearly, you have a really wonderful value system, which is like I agree. Everyone should be able to move through this world and feel physically safe. Like that feels like a pretty basic human right. What is one belief that you have about the future that people would consider bold or even controversial that you can see super clearly?
This is maybe not too bold, but I think capitalism solves most of the problems we're talking about. When you look at some of the countries that I've studied and say what went wrong, right? Where did things fall apart? And you look at it, and when this bedrock of safety disappears, capitalism tends to fall with it. And when that starts to happen, then people's future prospects goes down, which actually increases crime, which start this downward spiral. And so something I feel so strongly about is like we have this new project called Thriving Cities Fund where we invest in local entrepreneurs. It's not a nonprofit, this is not a donation. I just believe so much that the solution to our crime problem in America is jobs, is economic mobility. It's this just core belief that if you work very, very hard, you can achieve so much in this country. And I hope we never lose that because it's allowed me to do what I've been able to do in my life. And I hope the same will be true for my kids.
I think you and I have a similar philosophy, which is that in so many ways, what AI is doing is getting rid of really taxing, boring, mundane, honestly thankless jobs. It is enabling people to do more human jobs. And in many ways, it will create more jobs and more surface area. And so I don't fear AI. I actually
Yeah.
fear it not being absorbed fast enough in ways where it unlocks this better future in so many ways. Um, One last thing I want to ask before I go to the quickfire round. You have a big job, and like what you guys do matters, and there's a lot of stress in that because um, uh, I back a lot of companies, and sometimes I'm like, oh, this company is making, music. Like music isn't killing anybody, right? It's like
Yeah.
like you run akin to doctors and surgeons because you really are this incredible layer that when what you're doing works well, um, you save lives. And that's pretty incredible. Um, any sort of mentality, philosophy that the company has that sort of helps keep you guys steady, just given that there will be a mistake. Things aren't perfect. You could be 99.9% perfect. How do you think about leading people through that?
I mean, we've had this very long standing cultural norm and we've tweaked the words here and there, but it's effectively do the work. And we have to remind ourselves, to your point, Alexa, I think we actually have an easy job. We write code, we sell things, we design circuit boards. Our customers are the ones that who's working on the first night of Hanukkah? Our customers. Who's working on Christmas Eve? Our customers. New Year's Day? Our customers. July 4th? Our customers. Like our customers don't get a day off. And in your lowest moment, we expect them to be the highest. And so we just try to always go back to like, our job is so easy in comparison to our customer's job. Just like go do the work. And so I think we've built a culture that doesn't complain and works really hard because of that.
That is really beautifully said. Which is on our worst day, we need them to be their best. That's really well said. Garrett, I want to end on a quick fire round just because you're a really wise guy who's done a lot of good things. Um, is there a book of any kind that you recommend to people? So just first thing that comes to mind, quick answers. Is there a book that changed your life in any way?
So I just recently finished this one and I'm a huge fan of it, but it's the recent book on Genghis Khan and making of the modern world. And I say that because he's a historical figure that I've never thought much about. And it's a long read, but it's just, you know, it's a good reminder that over this period of time, different versions of the story come out. And for someone like Genghis Khan, like large parts of our society today stem from his idea. And he was nothing when he was born. He was just a person. And it just goes to show you that like any one of us can have an incredible impact on the entire world.
I love it. Is there a mantra or a phrase? I always say like a quote, something that kind of just like runs as like a value system for you. Or clearly, it sounds like you
Yeah.
have strong rules in your household. What's sort of a mantra or quote that you love?
Effectively, like you bring the weather with you, which we tell our kids all the time. Like if you're in a bad mood and you bring that with you, you're going to make everyone else in a bad mood. And I think so much of life as we get older is just getting really good at bouncing back from adversity and just going from bad mood to good mood, knowing that that mood carries everywhere you go.
I'm going to steal that. I love that. Um, is there a habit, being a repeat entrepreneur, just sort of a habit that you've learned kind of centers you?
I think for me, the number one thing is like every morning I make our kids breakfast. And it's just a good reminder going into the day that like my kids, they don't care about what's happening at work. They don't care about, they're not old enough yet to care about what's happening online or in the news. And for them, it's just like, are we having waffles? Are we having eggs? Are we having French toast? Like that's the only thing that matters. And so for at least that, 30 or 45-minute period, all I have to think about is getting food on the table and making, 3 little kids happy, which is pretty easy to do in the scheme of things when it comes to breakfast. So that's it for me. Like every day, start my day on a high note.
I also make breakfast every morning, and I'm just I'm feeling my breakfast crowd is more complicated because it's like mom waffles
Sticky.
and eggs
Yeah.
and a side of avocado, and I'm like, yes, it's coming.
Yeah.
And I want to end on your New Year's resolution for 2026. I don't know if you have one yet, but if you have anything that is going to be a new goal for your own life, pay it forward to us. What is it?
I've recently fully recovered from a hip injury from running. And so I'm back to running again. So I've got a half marathon in the first half of the year and I'll see if I can set a new personal best. So that's my at least first half of the year goal.
That's awesome. Garrett, on the most sincere note, I cannot thank you enough for making our streets safe for all of us. I do think we are moving towards a world where we can feel better about our own safety. And I think without you, we would not be imagining that world fast enough. And again, the Inspired team regularly says wonderful things about your company because it's one of the companies that is both extremely ambitious, doing incredible work that we can all rally behind and feel like we can root for it. So sincerely, I'm rooting for you. It's so nice to get to have you on today. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and we'll be back again with another episode of Inspired with Alexa Montobo. Thank you.